So the Chicago Bulls, they did not make a single trade at the deadline this year. Just a fair warning, by the way, for the rest of the video, there's going to be some yelling involved here. If you only count trades that involve players, trades where a player was actually traded away from the Chicago Bulls, you, me, everybody watching this video, we have all collectively made as many trades in the NBA involving a player since 2021 as the Chicago Bulls have. And that would be 0. They have traded, a second round pick here and a second round pick there to move up in the draft or whatever. But in terms of players being traded away from the Bulls, 0. None of them have been traded from Chicago since 2021. And given where this team is with this roster construction, it makes absolutely 0 sense. You know how little sense it makes? I'm going to be able to rant about this and talk about this for the entire video, and I will not need to make a cut. It will all be in one take because the thought process is so clear in my brain of how much of a disaster this is for Chicago. So we come into the season, right? Chicago's a play-in team last year. They lose the play-in to the Heat. They should have won the game. They didn't. The Heat end up going to the finals. We come into the year, okay, Chicago might be decent. Immediately, it's clear they are not going to be good. They're one of the worst teams in the league to begin the season. They have some injury issues, whatever. Chicago is not good. And if you look at the situation that they have on their roster, it is the perfect situation for a tear down, breakdown, let's rebuild some things situation here in Chicago, where the young talent's not really there, but they have valuable, tradable veterans to be able to get some stuff and move into a new era of basketball in Chicago. If there was ever a season in which to make some moves at the deadline, this would be the one. Because when you look at their situation, they don't have anything to play for. They're not going to be a top 6 team in the conference. They're certainly not going to be a contender. There has been 0 indication of them being a contender or a top 6 seed in the conference since the moment that Lonzo got hurt. At one point, a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, they were the 1 seed in the conference, and they were a really good story. Lonzo got hurt. From that point on, 0 indication whatsoever that Chicago Bulls are worthy of keeping the players on their roster rather than resetting. They're not going to be contenders. From that point on, they should have made the decision, okay, it is time to break it down. Every other team in the league in that situation, even finally Toronto, relented this year because they realized they weren't going anywhere. Every other team in that situation looks at it and says, you know what? You're right. It's time to break it down. Let's move into a new era. But not the Chicago Bulls, which is even crazier because I would argue that once Toronto relented and traded their guys away, there was no other team in the league that was more obviously set up for not only a teardown situation, but also actually had players on the team that other contending teams would want. If you look at their roster, DeMar DeRozan doesn't fit perfectly well alongside other stars because of his lack of spacing, needs the ball a ton. He's worth something to some of these teams around the league. Alex Caruso, I'm telling you right now, Dallas got PJ Washington for a first round pick, but they also had to trade away Grant Williams, who they traded a first round pick swap for. And so basically they traded 2 first round picks for PJ Washington is what I'm trying to tell you. I can guarantee you that Dallas would rather have Alex Caruso than PJ Washington. I can guarantee you they would. He's a more valuable two-way player. He's a much better fit in terms of what they need in terms of backcourt defense. They would much rather have Alex Caruso. Chicago didn't trade him. Chicago didn't make him available. Alex Caruso, for whatever reason, is untouchable for Chicago. And for Caruso, I do understand the concept of trying to get maximum value for him, but in a trade deadline that was really, really quiet, he was extremely valuable. And it's not just that they didn't move him, but it didn't even seem like they tried. Again, the word untouchable was used for Alex Caruso. When you're in a situation like Chicago's in, you can't really have an untouchable player, and certainly not someone that's potentially as valuable as Caruso was. Vucevic, still a good post scorer. He's worth something to some of these teams. And pre-injury, I think at the beginning of the year, Zach LaVine would have been worth something as well. But every single time Chicago looked at their situation, they decided that it was worth keeping their guys. And this is an issue for one of 2 reasons. One, you're not getting value out of the players right now. And for the most part, with the exception of Caruso, the value of these players is only going to continue to decrease, right? Like if you're looking for the perfect trade package in exchange for DeMar DeRozan, Vucevic, Caruso, whoever, then, and you're trying to get maximum value, in theory, yes, ideally, that makes a ton of sense. You want to try and get as much value out of these players as you can. The problem comes in when you're overvaluing your own players because, for example, DeMar DeRozan, let's say you're waiting for 2 first-round picks in exchange for DeMar DeRozan. That's what you think he's worth. You're not going to trade him otherwise. Let's presume that's the mindset in Chicago. 2 first-round picks, okay? The rest of the league's like, hey, we'll give you 1 first. Chicago's like, nah, it's okay. We want to keep him. You keep him past the deadline, okay? You wait a year. Hey, I want to trade DeMar DeRozan. You guys interested? No, now we'll give you a couple of seconds. Wait, what happened? I thought we were here and now we're here now. Okay, this space right here where you go 2 first-round picks, 1 first-round pick, couple of seconds, this right here, this gap is the opportunity cost for waiting for the ideal offer. And that is what Chicago is doing. Yes, in an ideal world, world, would you like to get the perfect trade package for Caruso, DeRozan, and Vucevic? Yeah, but there is an opportunity cost to waiting for those guys that is, one, a decrease in their overall value. So you go from, I want 2 firsts, you're only going to give me 1 first, I'll wait, to now you don't even want to give me the 1 first, and now I have to settle for a couple of seconds. You go from that to also, by the way, limiting your team's ability to add young talent by getting worse, which is the second major issue with not only Chicago, but just overvaluing your players in general. Because honestly, the NBA is one of the easiest leagues that we have out there to rebuild, because all you got to do is be bad, and they're going to give you chances to add great young talent to your team, but Chicago refuses to do that. You have 2 gigantic issues here for them, and I just cannot believe that they will not change their mindset on this, because one of 2 things is happening. Either they truly, honestly believe that Lonzo is going to come back and be fully healthy, and they're going to recapture the magic of the first 40 games of the year where they were the 1 seed in the conference a couple of years ago. They honestly believe that. That's one option. Or 2, they are just completely overvaluing their players and waiting for the perfect trade offers in exchange for them. And in either situation, it just doesn't make any sense, which is made all that much worse by the fact that they actually have a really good asset on their team. Kobe White's really good, and he's on an awesome deal, and he's going to average 20 a game this year. And his development, you could argue, is being hindered playing alongside someone like DeMar DeRozan and Vucevic and these guys that should be on other teams. I cannot explain how big of a deal it is that Chicago has looked at this situation and decided that they don't need to do anything. It is front office malpractice, I would argue, to not get something, because then either these guys are going to leave as free agents, they already had to re-sign Vooch to a new contract, or you're just not going to get the same level of value out of them as you would hope to. And I just, hold on. Sorry, I didn't technically do it all in one take because I'm about to lose my voice because I'm yelling so much and I had to get some water. I would argue, right? If you look around the league, who are the worst teams right now to be a fan of? I would argue the Nets are up there. The team's not fun. They owe some of their future first to some other teams, but they have some stuff. I mean, Mikal Bridges is interesting. Cam Thomas is interesting. Some future first round picks, potential opportunity to bring in some stars in the future. Okay. Some of the teams that are really, really bad, like Detroit, they have some interesting young talent. I even think Charlotte's in a pretty decent spot as a fan because at least your expectations aren't super high. Where are you right now if you're a Bulls fan and you're looking at this team and you're like, okay, so we got Kobe White and DeRozan and Caruso and Vooch, and we're going to run it back one more time. And I just have to continue to watch this team. There's nothing to be excited about. There's no young talent apart from Kobe White. And right now, if Chicago would approach the trade deadline correctly, I'd argue they could have 2 to 3 extra first round picks right now, or maybe the equivalent of that if they, decided to move on and trade Caruso, DeRozan, and Vooch. I'd argue they'd have at least 2 firsts or the equivalent of 2 firsts, which might even sound like a low number, certainly to the Bulls front office, but maybe to some Bulls fans. But I promise you that's better than watching these guys continue to run it back. And they're the new Toronto Raptors in terms of overvaluing their players, but even worse because at least Toronto eventually did decide that it was time to move on. And we have no indication that Chicago is actually going to do that. They honestly believe that there is a future here that involves them being one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, and I just don't see it. Is it possible that I'm completely missing something here? Sure, but everything that we know about roster construction and team building says that the Bulls should have made multiple moves at the deadline, honestly last year as well, and they just refused to do it.